Hello and welcome to this Warno NORTHAG 1v1 tier list. We'll be looking at the divs from a 1v1 perspective today. I'd say every div is going to be effective in team. It's much harder to make a team tier list because different divisions synergize with each other in different ways. So if you've got a good composition, any of these divs can work really well. I would actually argue that the NORTHAG divs, if used in team, if used with good, well-coordinated players, are very strong. Because they are very specialized divisions, almost all of them. Some of them aren't. Most of them are very specialized divisions with a very clear focus. And so if you have one specialty and your teammate has another and you work together, you can really make something happen. So let's start at the beginning. We've got our 10 divisions here. I am very much in the way. Let me just attach myself to the ceiling real quick. So we've got over here, I'll just use the mouse. Here we've got the 16th Belgian division. It's like a mech division. Then you've got 9th Panzer Division, which is the cream of the crop of East Germany, I believe. I believe it's the best one. In terms of the realism aspect, I believe they got the newest equipment. Dutch 4th Tank Division. I think it's a tank division. The Polish mech air mech. Sorry, okay, I keep saying this wrong. The Polish Air Marine Division. That is an airborne anchor there. They are the Air Marine Division, Marine Air Division. Then we've got the Polish Tank Division, the Polish Square Division, the Polish Mech Division, Soviet 25th Tank Division, the 19th Infantry Division, the 4th UK Armoured Division. MBAD stands for Multinational Bad Airborne Division, and the US 9th Motorised Division. So let's start on the left. We've got the Belgians here. Looking at the Belgian divisions, basically, yeah, it's an interesting one. So in terms of the Logi tab, you've got quite a nice Logi tab. You can really bring a lot of supply if you need it. Certainly for team games, if you your RT spam actually isn't that great for team games, but for 1v1 you can bring more than enough supply and you can keep all your stuff supplied. The infantry tab is decent. For starters, you get loads of slots. It's clearly supposed to be some sort of mech division. You get loads of slots. So you get 50 cals and 7.62s. You get military police, but sadly no military police vehicle, which is a big deal. Any div that gets a military police vehicle... I should probably put myself not on the ceiling anymore. My apologies. There we go. Any division which gets a military police vehicle is automatically that much better because you send the military police vehicle to just follow your tanks around. You just literally click F and click on your tank and it will just fast path with your tank wherever it goes, and then your tank will get very good suppression resistance. Sadly, no military police Iltis here, it's just a normal one. I should mention, if you want to see a full deck review with me going through every single division in painstaking detail, I recommend you check out the first link in the description. This is just a tier list, right? So yeah, if you want the full rundown, get that massive video, which is going to be quite a long one. So military police, you get reservist spam, and you get this is actually not a reservist transport, despite the fact that these guys are reservists. So you can really spam out these M113s if you want. You can get 36 if you want. The issue you have in this div is that they don't get good infantry AT. They do get forward deployed, right? But they don't get good infantry AT. Most of you guys are running around with either 14 pen, which is not enough to one-shot a 3 armor vehicle. I don't think it's enough to one-shot a 2 armor vehicle. Oh no, I think 14 might be. I can't remember. And then they get the bad law with 11 pen, which is definitely not enough to one-shot a 2 armor vehicle. The transport, like, this is 30 points for 2 armor and a 50 cal, which is alright. But then this one is 50, and it doesn't get a Milan on it. Doesn't get a Milan on it. This is a Bushmaster clone. It's like the Bushmaster off the Bradley. But honestly, the lack of an ATGM on these IFEs really hurts this division, and it hurts the Dutch one as well. So yeah, you don't get good infantry AT. Your squads are nothing special, but they're not terrible either. And you do get a lot of infantry, so a pretty decent infantry tab. But just the lack of an ATGM on the IFVs really struggles. And frankly, the IFVs are a little bit overpriced. If it was up to me, this would be 45. But yeah, you get Milan 2s, you get Milan 1s, right? Artillery tab is fairly standard. You get 81mm mortars, 107mm mortars, 81mm airborne mortars if you want to do an airborne rush, like send these forwards. I'll be honest, that's not really very useful because you also get the British 105s, the L19, which has a really big range, which means that generally for a 1v1, and we're talking about 1v1 here, you can just buy this, keep it at the start, and smoke wherever it is you need to smoke at the start. Whereas this, you'd have to send it quite far forwards. It's got the forward deploy. Anyways, you also get paladins, and so you can either just bring 2 or 4 or 2 up betted is preferable, and the arty slots here are really quite good. The tank tabs, now this one's a really funny div. This is my favourite div out of all of them. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's definitely my favourite. And that's because I've run out of water. I'll just do a cut here, I need to get a glass of water. Sorry about that cut there. Obviously, you won't have experienced any time loss, but I don't like doing cuts, so I do apologise for that. Basically, this div doesn't have any heavy tanks, but what it does get is forward deployed Humvee TOW 2s, which are pretty good, and it gets the Leopard 1 BE command, and basically all of the Belgian Leopards have max range on their guns, which is really interesting. So you can like properly blob these. You can buy 2 in a minute on every single one of them and still have points left over. Like, so if you bought this, it would be 220, then you'd actually be able to buy a 40-point supply. You'll notice that you don't actually get cheap supply, but that's not the end of the world. But it can be frustrating because usually you'll have like 35 points left over when you buy some units, right? But yeah, you could definitely get a lot of these guys in the Ehrlichens. It's just a shame. I think they are a bit too pricey, really. But you do have an IFE. It just doesn't have the ATGM. Yeah, but you can substitute that with the Iltis Milans, which you get 2 cards of, and the Humvee TOW 2. I tend to just bring 1 like that. And you can also get the Striker if you need that better range, but honestly it's a bit redundant when you can spend 25 points more and get good stealth and 25% more accuracy, 2 more pen, right? The Striker is just not that fantastic, really. This thing's overpriced. You don't want to be bringing that. It shouldn't be 60 points, basically. The TKS one's overpriced as well. But anyway, the point is that you can bring a huge amount of these Leopard 1s, and you can just spend the whole game spamming Leopard 1s, and they've got max range, which means that they can shoot at max range. I think there's like 1 or 2 if you're up against like a T80UD, I'm pretty sure you can't shoot it at max range because your pen is not high enough, I'm pretty sure. But most tanks, like T72s and stuff, you'll have no problem shooting at max range. And yeah, you get commands, tanks, and all sorts. So we're not building decks here. It's just a tier list. The recon tab's great. You can get snipers, which most divs get, but you can get ground surveillance radar. This is basically a clone of SAS Patrol, except they get an AT instead of a satchel. So it's not really a clone, right? But anyway, you can also get Eclairs for 30 points with an AT, right? Obviously, they're in second pentagram as well. It's a very nice tab. You could get an exceptional optics car for 25 points with a 50 cal, and you would get that I recommend, and put it on your guys. You get a recon helicopter, you get a drone. Drones are really useful because of, you know, especially on the bigger maps, you can really use them to check areas. You also get airborne deploy guys if you need them, right? But you've got airborne forward deployment. The AA tab is your weakest tab. Basically, you don't have any long-range AA. You don't have any Eyehawks. You've got Minstrels and Gepards. The aim time on the Gepards has come down to 1.5 seconds. So that's something. But you really do struggle against planes. Your Helo tab is nothing to write home about. You get this funny Helo, which has TOW2s on it, which is decent. Or you can get the one with more TOW2s and less availability, which honestly I don't recommend. The Air tab, yeah, this is the problem. You really struggle against air. This is the big weakness of this division. So you struggle against super heavy tanks, right? Although you can fight them if you're good at micro, you can have your tank blob and you can just smoke back on the individual ones, and you mix in some ATGMs. You've got your forward deployed, so you're going to be spending most of the game. You should be spending most of the game defending because you should secure positions with your forward deployed. And if not, you're doing like a minute 1 mechanized rush with Leopard 1s and these things, these IFVs, and then you just flood for the rest of the game. You flood with reservists and ATGMs all over the place and cheap tanks all over the place. So you know, you're strong early and then you defend for the rest of the game. Your main concern is that enemy planes, you just really struggle against them. You've only got one card of Minstrels. Minstrels are great, and then the Gepards are really not all that. They're bad against planes. They're great against helicopters, but they're bad against planes. Yeah, and then your only fighter is this, and it's not got long range missiles. It's a shotgun fighter. So against helicopters, you're fine, right? Your bomber options are, you know, not fantastic. I'm not really sure why this one is more points. Because it's got slightly better missiles. I don't think that's worth it, really, given that the payload is... Well, the payload's slightly bigger. It's only 5 points, actually. Yeah, it's probably not a big deal. But yeah, the cluster thing is good. The rocket thing is not good, but the HE things are all right. So you can do lots of bombing and stuff, but your key weakness is lack of air, right? And you'll notice that most of these NORTHAG divs have a key weakness, but generally this is one of the stronger divisions, and I would put it in the A tier. So next, let's talk about 9th Panzer Division, because it's next in the list. 9th Panzer Division is really, really good. So your Logi tab is fairly standard. You know, you can bring some supply. You do struggle from... because you've only got one cheap supply. You've got to bring these. I always bring 3 cards of supply in 1v1. Always. 2 is just not enough. You should be... If you're quite bad at the game and your units just die and you never repair them, then you probably only need 2. But as you get better, you will need 3, because you will heal your units and then you'll be like, I've run out of supply and I can't heal my tanks anymore. So you should be bringing 3 on this div. 3 is great. I mean, you could even be bringing 4 on this div, but you can't, right? So you'd have to bring a fob. Don't bring the fob. Just deal with 3. Your inf tab is, you don't have many options, but what you have got is good. Mott Schutzen are great for 45 points. You can bring him in a Conkers thing. That's new in NORTHAG. I don't really recommend it because it's 20 points for 4 pen. Right, so I don't really recommend it. But generally, I'm not doing that anyway. What I'm doing is I'm bringing the BMP2, which has the Conkers, and I'm updating it once. Remember, these aren't deck builds. If you want to see the deck build, check the link in the description. But I'm just showing you a general overview, right? So the Mott Schutzen, you would bring in a car, right? And then you'd get the Pioneers and the SPWs and the Pioneer Farm, whatever. It's not a deck build. I just can't help myself. Anyway, you don't get a huge amount of infantry. You get less than you would get in 7th Panzer. The artillery tab has a very, very good unit, this thing. It's got a really high resupply time, so I would always recommend putting a CV next to it, because that would give it 2 veterancy, which would reduce the reload time by an extra 20%, and the aim time by 15. And 20% of... so I'm not sure what the base is. This is already minus 20. So 80%... I need to get the calculator up now. So, yeah, 264 divided by, sorry, times by not, no, hang on. 264 divided by 0.8. What the heck? Oh, man. 264 divided by 0.8 is 330 seconds base, right? Times by 0.6 to get the veterancy one, which is minus 40, is 198 seconds. So you're saving over a minute if you put a CV next to this on every single reload. So you should definitely be doing that. Like, when you buy this, buy a CV with it. You're going to have to save up for over a minute anyway, because it's really expensive. But this thing is really good. The sad part is 2,000 supply cost. But because it takes so long to reload, this is what I said about, like, 3 cards of supply might not be enough, right? You might be supply limited. You could bring us RM70s, you can bring Gvozdyk, you can bring 120mm mortars. So great arty tab. Tanks. So, you know, you get your ATGM carriers, you get a COCOM carrier if you need it, which is great, and then you just get loads and loads and loads of T-72s. 17 AP, I realise this isn't a deck build, but I can't help but mention this. 17 AP is a crucial value, because that means that you will survive one hit from a 30 AP missile. 30 AP missiles is every single plane-launched AT missile in the game. They're all 30 pen for some reason. I'm really not sure why, but they're all 30 pen, and so you should always be paying 5 points more. But the idea is you get a lot of T-72s. You also get this, which is a mega T-72. So yeah, you get lots of T-72s. You get, you know, T-72 tanks, etc., etc. You can bring this if you want, whatever. So you get really good tanks. Your recon tab is just sort of... there's nothing particularly special about it, but you're not really missing anything either. Sorry, I'm just a very itchy guy. I don't know. You get recon helos, you get recon, you get high HP recon, you get exceptional optics for your tanks. You're not missing anything here. The only thing you are missing is some airborne forward deployment, unlike 7th Panzer, which gets airborne forward deployment. And then, you know, here you get Iglas, you get Shilkers, you get Cubs, you get Strellas, right? Helo tab, you get helos. You don't get a huge amount of helos. You get less than you do in 7th, but you get plenty of helos. And your air tab, you don't get seed, which is a problem, but you do get this fighter, which is really decent. 3 availability, good missiles, especially with the new suppress on miss feature for missiles. Range matters a lot, because even if your missile misses them with its bad accuracy, you're going to suppress them. And if you keep doing that, they're going to have to rout. So yeah, you get one of the best cluster planes in the game, if not the best cluster plane in the game. You get the best AT plane in the game. You get a really good HE bomber, right? So this div doesn't really have any weaknesses. In 1v1, it's exceptionally strong. It does everything well. You get Logi, you get infantry, and you get IFVs with autocannons, you get really good artillery, you get loads of tanks. Anything bigger and scarier than your tanks you can kill with the best AT planes in the game. You get the helos, you get the great AA, you get the good recon. So it's got no disadvantages except lack of airborne forward deployment, which, trust me, doesn't matter, because if the enemy gets there first, you buy the napalm grad and you level everything. So this is an S tier division. Next, we've got the Dutch 4th. Remember, these aren't deck builds. If you want to see the deck builds, check the description. This is just a tier list. There is a massive one where I go through everything in painstaking detail, and if you want to see games where I play each of those decks, those are linked in the description of that video, etc. So the Dutch division has some interesting things going for it. So you've got armoured supply, which is really decent. Getting some 2 armour supply is actually pretty decent. This is very difficult to counter battery. And then you get decent wheeled supply. You know, you get... This is only 2 per card, but it's a nice cheapo CV. Your infantry is... Basically, you get 36 reservists, and these reservists are better than the Belgian reservists in my eyes. I can't remember, actually. Gemobilisiert. And then what was the Belgian one called that we just did? Reservists. Oh, okay, so these guys actually do have a better AT weapon. So that's fair enough, actually. So maybe the Gemobilisiert are worse than the Belgian one. We're making a new one, aren't we? We're just showing things off. So So yeah, you get plenty of reservists, and they come in M113s. This one has smoke, which is really useful for the opener, because you can do a mech push at the start. There is a very key problem with the mech push at the start that we'll get to, which I discovered the hard way when I played this div versus Mix 90 on Airport Duel. Which, if you remember, you get access to that video right now. Sorry, I can't help myself. You know, you get some cheap, decent CV options. The infantry is decent. This is basically just mech rifle, arm rifles from the UK, except slightly worse because they've got only one MG. But these guys get a Carl Gustav, which makes them slightly better than the arm rifles. For only 5 points more, you get a Carl Gustav. But this has better availability. The main problem is your auto cannons don't have Milans on them. There's a big problem with this div, a big strategic weakness. There are two, in fact. The first one is you don't have any cheap ATGM carriers. So when we were talking about the Belgians a few minutes ago, I mentioned that you could get Milan 2s, you could get Milan 1s, and you could get like Milans in this tab, in the tank tab. You don't get that here. This is your ATGM carrier. It doesn't have good stealth. It's 75 points because it's a TOW 2, right? So it's very expensive. And your IFVs are slightly overpriced and don't have an ATGM on them. So you don't have any cheap ATGM carriers. You also can't use infantry cheap ATGMs because your only infantry ATGM is the TOW 2 and it's not cheap. So that is a strategic weakness. You do get Dragon 1s, which I would make this 50 points. I think this is a bit overpriced. You're paying 10 points for a Dragon 1, which can't one-shot. I think it can one-shot a 2-armor vehicle. I'm pretty sure. In fact, let's just check this, because I've been saying this a lot today. So let's just check it. Basically, if you go to War Yes, you can look at the Game Knowledge tab, and it will tell you, here we go. So that is not the right one. For heat values, if you have 14 AP, and the enemy has 10 armor, you deal 3 damage. Sorry, what? If the enemy has 2 armor and you have 14 AP, you deal 8 damage. So you actually need 16 AP to one-shot a 2 armor vehicle. So there you go. You can't one-shot a 2 armor vehicle with this dragon. So I think it should be 50 points, really. And they're only 7 men, right? So I don't really think it's fairly priced. I would make this 5 points cheaper, because these guys, you know, the Carl Gustav, it's got 16 pen, and if you go back here, you see 16 pen versus 2 armor will one-shot a 2 armor vehicle, and it only deals 9 damage against you need 17 pen to one-shot a 3 armor vehicle. So yeah, but basically you can do the funny mech rush with your, you know, your M113s. I see you only get 2 cards of these instead of 3. You've got military police if you need them, but sadly no military police transport again. You've got sappers, but not that many, so you struggle in towns. But your infantry is just sort of standard infantry. There's nothing to write home about. I mean, it's a tank div, right? Well, I mean, is it? It's a tank div with very nice infantry slots. So your infantry is just sort of standard. There's nothing to write home about. Your artillery is decent because you get this thing, 203s. Second Panzergren and so on gets these, so these are really good. You can also get 120mm mortars in an armoured transport with smoke, so that's decent. Although the smoke probably doesn't matter for that. But basically you get really nice artillery. Not as good as like packed grads and stuff, but this is a very nice artillery piece. It's really annoying. It feels like it's actually stabbing me in the eye or something. Anyway, tank tab, right? So you get some really juicy tanks, right? The problem you've got with the Leopard 2s, they've got a really nice gun on them. These Dutch Leopard 2s have a really nice gun on them. 21 pen. That's crazy. Really nice gun on it. The problem is, this only has 16 armor, which, as we were discussing before, means that it dies to one shot from a 30 AP missile. Now, you might say, well, that's not so bad, because I can bring so many of these. This one will actually survive that, so you should start off by buying these, and then switch into these. The issue, and you know, you get loads of these tanks, right? You also get the Leopard 1 NL, which is like the Leopard 1A1A1 from West Germany. It's not fantastic, but it can be good at the start for your mech rush. But the problem is no cheap ATGM carriers, although I would recommend bringing this. And you don't get... remember, this isn't a deck build, it's a tier list, so I'm not going to be going through it entirely. I just need to stop saying that, sorry. Check the link in the description. Yeah. So you could do a funny mech rush. The problem is, if your enemy's bringing like BMP-1s with a bunch of Malyukas on them, your funny mech rush at the start isn't really going to go anywhere, because you can't really fight back with your Leopard 1A NLs, which don't have the range. Your ATGM carriers are very expensive, but they do work, so you could bring them. And, you know, your IFVs don't have an ATGM on them, so it's difficult. So you're tempted to open with a Leopard 2 to kill the enemy IFVs. This is the issue with this div. The first issue was what? I've already forgotten. Yeah, the IFVs are a bit overpriced. You don't have cheap ATGM carriers. That's the first issue. You don't have cheap ATGM carriers. The second one is, so then you're sort of forced to bring your heavy tanks, which, yeah, you got a lot of. But your AA is even worse than the Belgian division's AA. So you've just got Stingers and Gepards. This is called a cheetah, but it's literally a Gepard. It's just like the other Gepards. It's basically identical. In fact, I think it is identical. And so you cannot defend... And when you go to the air tab, you see you only have shotgun fighters, which only have 3,800 meters range. So you can't effectively defend your early game mech blob from the air. So unless you literally open 2 fighters, in which case you don't actually have that much other stuff, because that's 400 points. That's almost a third of 420. It's almost a third of your deployment just on the fighters. Then your mech push isn't going to have that much in it. You can still do it, but the thing is, basically, early game, this div gets bullied pretty hard if the enemy decides to open with lots of air. Gets bullied pretty hard, and so it's a pretty big strategic weakness not being able to defend yourself from the air, and all your tanks, apart from one card, all your tanks die in one hit to 30 AP missiles, which is every air-launched ATGM in the game. So you really struggle with this div to defend your heavy tanks, and your infantry is nothing to write home about. They get absolutely tons of it. So it's a difficult one. I mean, it can work, but basically you've just got to constantly keep your fighters up, right? Your 4 not very good fighters. They're good against helicopters, right? But they're not good against planes. Especially with these new suppress on miss features, where a missile that's missing you suppresses you, which I think is a good idea overall. But what it means is that these close-range fighters are less effective now, because the enemy's first missile is going to suppress you, and you're not going to be able to suppress him until you get right close, and then your accuracy is going to be lower than his accuracy because you have been suppressed by his long-range missiles. So the div has a big weakness. In team games, you're not going to notice this. In 1v1 game, you're going to notice this. So I'm putting it as B tier because it's got a big weakness, but the rest of the div is pretty solid. Sorry for the cut there, guys. Now let's look at the Polish Air Marines, the Corpus Desantawi. So this div, you know, you get decent... Your supply options, I'll be honest, aren't particularly fantastic. This one is wheeled. I know you can't really tell. And it's fairly cheap. Only carries 500 supplies. So that's pretty decent, actually. I mean, what more could you want? And then you've got the big one for your third one. Or you can get the helicopter one. And then you get decent CVs, sorry. You can get a forward deployed one, you can get one with 3. The main advantage of this division is that its infantry is actually really good. They get a lot of infantry, and some of it's really crazy. So these guys, 55 points for 9 men and a satchel is like fair enough, really. It's nothing to write home about. But these guys, not these guys, they're not very good. These guys are 9 men, and they don't have airborne, but they do get an RPG. and they get Resolute because they're classed as Marines. These guys are really good because you send them into the forest. They don't have high pen. As we just spoke about, you need 16 heat to one-shot 2 armor vehicle, but they've got satchels and RPG, so they can defend themselves from basically any threat. You put them in a town, you put them in a forest, it's pretty decent. And you can get them in a wheeled transport or, you know, this thing. Sadly, this thing doesn't have smoke, unlike, say, the FV432 or the M113A1G on West Germany. The FV432 is on the UK. Sorry for just reeling off numbers like most of you probably don't get. I do apologise. This is an absolutely crazy squad. So this is 9 guys with 3 flamethrowers and Resolute. They're very expensive, but, you know, this Giga Chad here, he knows what he's about. You get these into a town, you're gonna have a great time. And it gets better, right? So you've also got Panzerjäger, basically Airborne Panzerjäger. The 18 pen is enough to one-shot a 4 armor vehicle, so there you go. This is good Polish AT. This is the best Polish AT, actually, 18 pen, which is low compared to other nations, but this is a decent squad. And you can mix that in with your other guys if you want. You also get these are just regular Marines, right? So they're 12 men, which means they fight strong, right? They fight strong, and you could put them at 2 vet. They're resolute as well, so they get that that buff, you know, that anti-suppression buff. Basically, anywhere where infantry is used, this div rocks. You got the massive squads. Like, this Topaz 2 AP ain't great because it doesn't have smoke, although it's only 25 points for KPVT, which is not too bad, actually. But remember, this isn't a deck build. Yeah, and then you've just got so much good stuff here, and all these are 1-pointers, so this is a crazy good tab. It gets even better because these guys have the military police tag, which means you should definitely be putting them in your deck. Sadly, no military police transport, but you put these in your deck, and you just keep one of these with every inf blob, and you will just be winning fights left, right, and center. Because not only are your guys coming at high veterancy anyway, because your point slots are so cheap, so you can afford to put most of them at 2 vet. They're 2 vet. Most of them, many of them are resolute, which means they take even less suppression. So you take less suppression because you're veteran. You gain suppression back faster because you're veteran. You take less suppression because you're resolute, and you gain suppression back faster because you have the military police guys with you as well. Suppression regeneration bonus. So your infantry is really hardcore, really good infantry. You also get special forces, commandosi, decent squad. 3 MGs, RPG, 60 points, special forces, airborne, really decent squad. Then you get even more guys. I mean, honestly, there's just not space to fit them all in. And you get Metis squads, which you definitely should be bringing. So many good squads in here. The weakness is that your best ATGMs are 17 pen in this tab, which ain't great. Artillery, you get really good artillery, especially given that you're supposed to be like an airborne div, I guess because of the marine component. You get the Pion, which is really good, 203 millimeters, 4.91. It really messes people up. And you also get the grads. You can even bring 4 grads. So for team, you can bring 4 grads. I would not recommend bringing 4 grads here. If anything, I would up-vet these grads. But honestly, just 2 grads is enough, and then the Pion. So you get lots of artillery. This thing is a proper meme machine. It's nothing fancy. Basically, you have to buy all 4 of them if you want it to do anything. At which point, you know, 65 times 4 is 260. So you might as well have just bought a grad. Right. So this is nothing special at all. If it could shoot smoke, it'd actually be pretty cool, but I don't think it can. Anyway, the tank tab. More funny stuff here. It's quite a weak tab in that you don't have any great tanks, but you get loads and loads of ATGMs. This thing is not really worth it. Remember, this isn't a deck build, it's a tier list. but you can spam out a bunch of these cheapo fire support vehicles. So this has mediocre stealth, which is very useful. You also get T-55As. So you know you can now I've got 18 cheapo things. You also get this funny boy. So this is a T-55 with coffin launchers on it. And that is, like, it's basically a must bring. It's really funny. Bring it at Novet because you want to use the coffin launchers. But yeah, it's a good arty piece, which means that you get really good arty in this div. Your recon is nothing to write home about. I mean, this is just 6 men with an RPG GSR. They don't even have MGs. This is PT-76 recon. You get a SIGINT helicopter, which on the bigger maps is actually really useful. So that has the circle around it that tells you when enemies are near, and you can send it to the sides of the map to get an idea of somebody sneaking around you. So it is useful. You do get snipers, and you can get. So this is actually a really, really strong unit because this comes in a helicopter, which means that you get airborne forward deployment with a helicopter, which means you get to some places really, really fast at the start. And then you'd want maybe some ground-based recon, so like the sniper or something, right? AA tab is really quite weak. You don't have any missile AA. You just got the Strelas. Strelas. This with a Strela on it. Polish people love Strelas. ZU with Strelas on it. But your Helo tab's decent. You get these Sokol things with, you know, AA missiles, which is fair enough. Or loads and loads of rockets, which is fair enough. And you could get these, you get Kokons if you need them. The real magic is the fact that you get this fairly decent air tab where you can bring lots of fighters. I actually do bring 6 fighters on this div. So it's a strong div because it's airborne, your infantry's pretty cracked, and then after you're airborne, you can spam out 10 trillion ATGMs, so like 14 in this tab easily. You could even bring 21 if you wanted. And you should definitely bring, I'm pretty sure I bring both of these, I can't remember. But yeah, you've got 16 here, another 14 here. Quick maths, that's 30. And then you've got the helicopters. So airborne divs, we call them bite and hold divs because you bite at the start and then you hold on for dear life like a dog, and the guy's shaking his leg and he can't get rid of the dog. So your bite is very strong because you've got your, you know, you get the fighters out at the start to defend from aerial threats. You don't bother with, because you don't get forward deployed AA, right? Well, you do, you get the Strelas. Then, so your bite's really strong because you get really strong infantry. Then your hold is 10 trillion cheapo ATGMs all over the place with really like grads coming in. Whenever the enemy attacks, you hit him with a grad. And if he brings planes, you've got the best AT plane, one of the best AT planes in the game. This is just the East German one with a different lick of paint on it. And you've got one of the best cluster planes in the game. You've also got Seed, which is really important because you can send this out in front of this and keep it alive. So your bite's very strong and your hold's very strong. So it's a very strong division. So I would have it as A tier, and I'd have it better than the Belgians. And the reason I've put it as A and not S is because, yeah, you don't really have like heavy tanks, you don't have IFVs, you know, you are missing tools, but your bite's very strong and your hold's very strong. I do apologize for the number of cuts in this video. I keep being interrupted. So the next division that we're going to look at is the Circle Division, the Polish Circle Division. This is the Polish Tank Division. So there's a lot to get through here, but it'll be quite similar to the, you know, it's Polish, right? So it's similar to the other Polish div. So this tab, you know, nothing to really write home about. You get some good supply options, right? And this is pretty decent. For 3 availability, this is really nice for 3 availability. It's got a Malyutka. It's not got smoke, but 3 availability is really not bad for this. For the infantry tab, basically you get BMP 1s without smoke, which is actually quite useful because they're really cheap. They're like 10 points cheaper than the East German one. and they've got Malyutkas on them, so you get a lot of Malyutka spam in this div. You also get BMP2s. Sadly, they don't come at a nice veterancy, so I actually like to bring these down vetted, which is maybe a mistake. Maybe I should be bringing them up vetted, but then you only get 10. 10 versus 16. So I like to bring them down vetted. And then if you need more guys, you know, you get these guys up vetted with their 14 pen RPGs. Once again, you get sappers that have AT on them, just like in the other Polish div that we just covered. So you also get the Reese, which is a pretty decent sapper squad. In terms of your transport options, the Scott 2 is decent. And the Scott 2A, you're basically paying 5 points for a KPVT, which is better than the Dushka. It does have higher... Depends, really. Sometimes I say it's a good idea, sometimes I don't. But basically, you get decent infantry in this div. Despite it being a tank div, you get pretty decent infantry. You know, with the flamethrowers and stuff. You don't get Conkers again. That's a recurring theme with the Polish divs. But you do get these Wusu guys. So the Wusu are 9 men military police. Unlike something like Prevost or RMP, which you can expect in like UK's First Armoured or whatever. So these are pretty decent, and you can keep them. So your Nova infantry, when it goes into combat, sadly, no military police vehicle here, because that would be really useful for your BMP2s with their Novet. But your Novet guys can be assisted by military police, as you know, it's just a decent squad. Sadly, 3 SMGs, which aren't too useful, because usually they can't fire. But yeah, you get decent infantry. Your artillery is really good, actually. So you get the Danners, which are wheeled 152s, so basically immune to counter battery if you just keep them on a road and keep them moving after every shot. Basically immune. And you can get a lot of them, which means you can upvet. You can do it like this. You also get 2 cards of Grads. Now, with an armored div, you don't really... You could theoretically stretch this to 4 cards of supply, which I think is what I did in my game, my team game. For 1v1, 4 cards of supply is rough, but basically you can have that, or you can save yourself 5 AP and do this, and you can keep those firing all game with your 4 cards of supply. You could also keep all of your tanks supplied, so you get a lot of T-72s, which are decent. 17 armor, as we spoke about, very, very important, stops you from dying from one shot. You get the cheap ATGM carriers, you get the 17 armor, you know, you get some cheaper ones. You get the Wilk, which is a pretty decent tank. You get plenty of tanks, you get lots of tanks, you get lots of T-72s. It's not as good as 9th's tank tab, right? And your arty tab isn't as good as 9th's tank tab, and your infantry tab isn't as good as 9th's infantry tab. Your recon tab is better. You'd get some nice choices here. You get ground surveillance radar. You get special forces, which come in a special force jeep, which goes faster than regular jeeps because it's special forces. It's also called a honker, which is very funny. And yeah, you get some decent guys, right? So it's a slightly better recon tab. Your AA tab's decent because you get Cubs, Strellas, and Strellas. Sadly, no Iglas, so it is still worse than your 9th. Do you see where I'm getting at here? And then your Helo tab is a bit more generous than the 9th East German one, but it's not... this is a pretty decent unit. For 70 points you get Malyutkas, but I mean it's not as good as like a Lynx Hellarm, for example, right? Which has the same range, but the Ito one at least has a lot more of... you're basically paying for the autocannon. But yeah, so you get good helicopters, and then your plane tab's just garbage, man. You get AT planes, which are decent, but your fighters are trash. They don't have long range at all. So the div suffers a lot, and if you compare it to a well-rounded div like 9th East German, it is quite weak. So that is why I have it at B tier, because it's basically just like a really bad version of this one. So the next one... Oh, hang on. I accidentally put this here. It was supposed to be this one. My bad. So sorry guys, I'm really tired when I'm making these videos. I accidentally put this in the wrong place. It's actually the circle one that we're talking about, and I have it as A tier because it's got decent tanks, right? It's got good artillery, really good artillery. It's got decent infantry with BMP2s. It's just, in every way, it's like a slightly worse version of, and you know, you can do the whole grad thing, right? You've got better supply situation than Ninth. You've got slightly better helicopters than Ninth, but in most ways, you're like a weaker version of Ninth. So I put it as A tier because you still have most of the tools, and late game, you will tend to win. Right, you get a lot of T-72s, but you're just not as good as Ninth. The next one is the square one. The square one. So the square one is the Polish Mechanized division, not the Polish Armoured division. If you Polish, these words mean something to you. So this one has some pretty problems. Basically, you know, logistics, nothing to write home about, nothing wrong with it, nothing right with it. This is a really decent card. And you can also bring a car one if you want, you know. Helo CV if you need it. The infantry tab, you get a pretty decent infantry tab because you are a mechanized thing, right? You do not get BMP2s. So you don't get any autocannons. And your BWPs, you could spam them out a lot. You could spam them out a lot, right? And you get a lot of BWPs, right? They don't have smoke. But for 25 points, your infantry's coming in really quite cheap. And you have, because they're so cheap, like they're 10 points cheaper than... So if you compare it to this is 30. Oh, so it's only actually 5 points cheaper. My bad. My bad, it's only 5 points cheaper. Oops. But anyway, it all adds up. Oh, I'm really making a pig's ear of this. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just really tired. So you get lots of BMP1 spam. You will basically not run out of BMP1 spam. You will not run out of infantry. The Scott 2 is something. You get the Reese, you get the sappers. This is similar to the tank one, but you get more slots. You get the Wusu, right? You also get Paichota, which are, you know, they're like Paichota's mech, but you're paying 10 points for 2 guys, which is rough. But you do get Commandosi with their special forces. You can bring them in rocket things if you want. But yeah, you struggle against ATGMs because... Okay, there you go. That's a funny one. Probably wouldn't bother bringing that, to tell you the truth, but it is a funny vehicle. You only get 17 pen ATGMs, right? In the Arty tab, you get a grad which has an extra reload. Sure, right? So you can bring 2 grads and you can keep them supplied because you get a really nice logistics tab. But it's not really as good as the tank tab one because you don't get the good howitzers. You just get this, which is not as good as the Dana because it's self-propelled and you know it's just not as cool. It's not as cool. Anyway, you do get even more ATGMs, right? The main problem is you don't get any T-72s, so you're stuck with T-55 Meridias, which are really not great. They're quite expensive for what they are. Their pen is very bad. Their armor's fantastic, but they just can't shoot at max range, which is what your ATGMs are for, right? And then you get lots of the coffin launchers, which are very funny. You can bring many coffin launchers. You can get a Meridia coffin launcher. The main problem is that the availability on these units is quite weak. Or you could just spam out regular T-55As, just get 1 coffin launcher and then, you know, the rest on something else. This has smoke for 50 points and 3 armor. It can survive a TOW 2 hit, so it could be worth it. But if you just want coffin launchers, then, you know. So your tanks aren't great, right? And your recon is just like the circle one. Do you see what I mean? And your air is a bit better, is it? No, because the circle one gets the cubs. You get OSAs, and you can get quite a lot of them. And you will need them. This div's AA situation is quite diabolical. You get the bad Strela, but it's wheeled, so it can help you with your opener. You get helicopters and stuff, right? This is a Malyutka thing with Strelas. This is a Malyutka thing. This is just rockets. You can get phalangers, you can get Kokons, but yeah, your air is not great at all. It's actually really, really, really bad. This costs as much as that one on ninth with 3 availability, but it's just so much worse in so many ways. And it's only got 2 availability. You do get the AT plane, you do get the HE plane, no seed. It's a rough one, guys. It's a rough one. It's just like a bad version of the tank one and a bad version of the airborne one. I find it quite difficult to justify playing this division. So we're gonna put it as B tier. Actually, no, we're gonna put it as C tier. We're gonna put it as high C tier because yeah, it's not. I mean, this div has at least heavy tanks and stuff. This one, it's just a bad version of this one and this one, and the only advantage really is that you can really get those BMP ones out, although you can't really because you're only really limited to 3 cards, right? You get a lot of infantry, but your infantry is really nothing to write home about. Like, this is a decent squad, but, you know, your RPGs aren't great. 14 pen, right? I believe you do get, yeah, the 18 pen Panzerjäger style thing, and hey, you could get even more BMP 1. So it's basically like a BMP 1 spam. That basically, you will never, if you build this properly, so like not like how I've built it, you'll literally never run out of anything. But what you're bringing to the table is not great. And your Arty is worse than the Marine one. I mean, it's weird. Yeah, so C tier is what it's going to be. Next up, we got the 25th Soviet, so this is a pretty funny one. So, these guys have a pretty key weakness. Basically, they've got 2 logos for some reason. That's the weakness, yeah. Logitab, nothing to write home about. It's decent. You know, you get this as well. You could even get 6 of those, but you get so many tanks that you don't need them. You get a lot of supply and stuff, right? This is where it gets better. So, 4 strength with a military police car, which you can put with all of your tanks. Right, so it's starting to get better. Your tanks now will receive suppression debuffs, whatever. Your inf, obviously there's really not very great slots here, but you get BMP2 Motorised, so... Right, you can get 12 of those. You'll notice that this is on a better vet curve than the Polish ones. These are 964, whereas if we go to the Polish ones, these are 853. So you get 2 fewer if you're Polish, and you'll notice that this squad is more expensive. It is better, but the squad is more expensive, which is basically making your BMP2s more expensive, and you get less of them. So it's a rough one, and so that's why I keep those Polish ones down vetted when I bring the Polish BWP2s, which are just BMP2s in Polish. W stands for why is our availability lower, but basically you can bring plenty of BMP2s. The BMP1 Conquers is like, just get the BMP2, basically. But yeah, you can bring, if you're in team, I would bring all 3 cards, but basically there's a case to be made for bringing some sappers in case you need them. And you don't get a lot of infantry here, so you actually might want to keep everything down vetted and just bring the Commandatura when you need them. But generally, I've had decent luck with just not bringing that much infantry. And then, yeah, down-vetted Pulmachiki for your wheeled guys, right? So, your Inv tab is rough, but it gets a lot better. Artillery, you get some really good artillery here. So you get Grads, 2 cards. So team game lovers will love spamming grads, but because the slots are so cheap, if you were a 1v1 player, you'd bring them like that. You also get the Mr. S, which is decent. It's like better than an Acacia, essentially, because the rate of fire is higher, the aim time is lower, so it's definitely worth it. You've also got the smoke and the and the NSVT, which that's what if you get into that stage where your Mr. S is on the front lines, you've probably made a mistake somewhere. But the main thing is that the Mr. S has more range, which means that at the same range, it will have a much smaller dispersion circle than the Acacia. So the Mr. S is a lot better than an Acacia. In fact, it's very similar to the Giant S, which is in 6Y. So you've seen that before. In fact, it is very similar. The difference is the Mr. S is once again, it's got less range, which means its dispersion circle will be slightly wider, but it's got the smoke, it's got top armor, which makes it harder to counter battery, and it's got the NSVT and stuff. So I bring the Mr. S, although if you just want raw artillery power, the Jiatsin is better. But hey, you can bring both, right? You can even upvet this, and that's going to aim really fast. And upvet this, right? But yeah, it's very exciting. Your tank tab is pretty crazy. So you get these T64 OBR-83s, which they've got high pen at low range, and they're quite cheap. They do not survive a 30 AP missile. Neither does this, neither does this, neither does this, neither does this. So all of your tanks would die in one hit to a 30 AP missile. However, ERA makes it so that you have 1 more HP. And as we spoke about, 16 armor, right? 30 pen means, where are we? Get back up to the AP table. 16 armor at 30 pen is 10 damage. But hey presto, you have 11 HP if you bring the ERA ones. So, for 10 points more, I'll admit, when I was making the deck for this, I didn't actually notice this. So, that is a big oof on my part. Because, yeah, the ERA is going to save you from those 30 AP missiles, which is actually quite important. So, yeah, you want to be, well, to be honest, at this rate, you're going to be bringing them all. Because these come at an extra rank of vet, so you get 2 at max vet, at 2 vet, whatever. So realistically, you're going to be bringing all of them, and this thing, and the CV tanks if you need them. So, maybe a couple less of these. So you get a lot of T64s basically. And in the recon tab, you get drones, you get a T-64B recon tank, which is pretty useful for the opener, given that you don't have any forward deployed. This thing rocking up at minute 0 is very difficult for the enemy to deal with until he buys that 30 AP plane and one-shots it, right? You can get more rocket things. You can literally get 2. You can literally bring all those rocket things if you want decent recon tab, right? You get Cubs, you get Strels, you get Iglas. What's not to like? Helo tab is decent. Once again, you get AA helos, like the ones in 39th. In fact, it is the same. Sadly, you only get 1, right? But you get some fairly cheap Kokons here. You can get cheapo Kokons. There's a lot of different choices. I'm not sure which one's better. I would prefer this one, but sadly, you only get 1 of those. So then the next best thing is probably to get this one. You could get this if you're a Muppet, right? Even though you can literally get the same thing in this tab for 100 points at much higher availability. This is only 2 per card. Then you get loads of fighters, SUAT, you get Seed, so it's a really decent div. The enemy with his 30 AP missiles will really struggle to break through your exceptional fighters, your Cubs. You just got to worry about the lack of infantry. So the div, it ain't perfect, but it is really strong. And I put it here, and I think it's better than the Polish tank one. right? Next, we've got the 19th British Infantry Division. I won't spend too much time on this. They don't really have good stuff. Basically, it's just, it's just like your standard mech division, so they've got arm rifles and stuff like that. So we just put it in C-tip. High chart div. So this is the British 4th Armoured div. I'm sorry, Britain bros, we couldn't save it. This one is really rough. This one is really rough. So basically, your Logi tab is decent. You get FV432 supply, which is great. You get, you get supply. It's kind of weird how they're only one card. The Sultan's a decent CV for the price. You know, the Saxon's decent as well because it's got the smoke and it's wheeled and stuff. So a decent tab here. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it's alright. Your infantry tab, so this is where things get a bit weird, right? So basically, you don't get IFVs in this division. Your consolation prize is you get something called a SCAT, which is just an FV432, same price, but it has 2 MGs. So you don't get any warriors, right? You don't get any forward deployed guys. You don't get any warriors. These are 3 points at the end here. So it's really difficult to bring them. The Terriers are a decent consolation prize, right? You get rifles. These don't even come with the scat thing. You get motorized rifles if you want some faster rifles. I'm not sure why you would, given that. I mean, they're one more men with a worse rocket launcher, but the Lore 80 swings fights, right? So, you get Milan 2s, Milan 1s, etc. This is the new vehicle for 4th. It's like a FV432 Milan, but it's got bad stealth. Although for 30 points and smoke. But, you pay 10 more points and you get a Milan 2 with 2 armor. And it's way faster. So I bring that. It's not great. It's not great. It's not great. There's no military police vehicle. The Wombat's still terrible. It's really not great. The RT tab, you get this thing off Second UK, which honestly is pretty decent. I've sort of fallen in love with it. But, Second UK gets all this stuff as well. Abbott's now have their direct fire, by the way. Sadly, this still doesn't. But yeah, this does now. Yeah, it's not a great tab. Hank tab. So this is sort of where the magic happens. But so in terms of like new things, you get the 105 Centurion. Like I said, if you want to see a full deck build, check the link in the description. We're just covering strengths and weaknesses here. So 105s, and you get basically instead of IFVs, you got to bring these Romor AVREs with the siege gun. This thing is like not a great gun. It's very cheap though, so I bring one of each. You don't get any Milan ATGM cars, right? So if you want ATGMs, you're forced to bring the Striker, which is very overpriced for what it is. Compare it to the Jaguar 2, which literally has 6 armor. It's rough, man. It's rough. All of this is in other divs. These 3. So this is a new one, 100 points for a 16 pen. I mean, so for 20 points less, you lose 1 armor. I think 12 is a very important value because it saves you from toe 2s. So 12 armor. What is a toe 2? 25 pen, I think. Toe 2, 25 pen. Yeah, so that's a 25 pen at 12 armor. You get 9 damage, and at 11 you take 10, right? So the 12 armor is a very important value. This will survive a toe 2, and this will not. But, it's 20 points. The guns are better on the T55A against infantry because it's a HMG instead of an MMG. Although MMGs did get buffed in the last patch. It's got smoke, which is very useful. It's slower. It's a rough one, man. It's a rough one. But I guess like early game you could spam them out. But yeah, it's not great. I mean, Yeah, 3, right. Same as the Chieftain Mark 9. Like, I really think the availability should be a bit better on this. I think it should be more in line with the T55A. So, basically, your bread and butter is Chieftain Mark 11s, if you get that far. So, the idea is, in place of your IFVs, you bring the AVREs. In place of your, and then you can do your early game Chieftain attack thing, whatever, right? Only one card of this. Whoops. But look, for 40 points, you get 3 pen and extra range. So actually, it's more like 4 pen, which is a big deal. The same availability. um, so yeah, you don't have challenges, right? Like, these aren't that great. I don't understand why it's 90 points. They're really slow. The aim time came down to 4 seconds. Recon tab. Yeah, you get exceptional optics links. Okay. I mean, that's decent, I guess. And then everything else are things you've seen before. So you could get a Gazelle rocket recon, which is just not worth it because you only get 3 availability. It's only got 12 rockets, so it literally doesn't matter. Yes, Scimitars and Foxes and the Zibby thing for your tanks, right? You get Motorized Scouts. This is, I believe, the only new infantry unit in this tab, so this is new. The Chancellor's new, the Rocket's new, and the Motorized Scouts are new. So these guys are just, they're a decent squad, right? Because they're 8 strength, and they've got a decent rocket launcher, which isn't actually that decent. I mean, it can one-shot 2 armor vehicle, which ain't amazing, but they've got smoke, right? So here you've got the Darkfire, which is just not worth the price, really, but basically it's because this one's kind of overpriced as well. But this can move around, and this can't, and the range ain't actually that much better. Accuracy's better. But yeah, this div is really kind of pants. The Helo tab doesn't even have the Gazelle rockets, right? And the air tab, you've got the Phantoms, so no tornadoes. This thing, the Jaguar cluster's a really good one, but Second UK has that as well. And then you get these Phantoms which have sky flashes on them, which you might think great, but generally it just makes your bombers more expensive. This one's a crazy payload, though. This is a crazy payload. This is a good plane, because it's got cluster and bomber and sky flashes. Can't shoot helicopters, right, but it's pretty decent. The only problem is the fact that it's got a sky flash makes you think, oh, I'll keep it in to shoot at the plane, and then it dies and you lose your amazing bomber. But the payload is good. So let's recap. It is first armored without the SAS. It is first armored without the warriors. It is first armored without the challengers. It is first armored without the tornadoes. It is first armored without the wheeled good stealth ATGMs, the Rover Milan. It's just bad. It's just a bad div. So, D tier. Next, we've got MBAD. You can probably tell how this is going to go. This is the other British division. So, it's not really. It's more of like it's called Multinational Bad Airborne Division. That's what it stands for. MBAD. It's a shame they didn't actually write it. Just put MBAD. Whatever. So these guys, this is kind of a not amazing sitch either. Your Logi tab is really quite weak. You don't have a lot of slots here. All your stuff you're sort of paying through the nose for. You don't have any big supply. I suppose you got the Helo one. But yeah, your supply ain't fantastic. Like, this is really slow. This is a little bit faster. But it carries 300 supply. This thing's alright, I guess, but you paid 5 points more every time because it got the forward deployment. And for some reason it doesn't have the MG on it, which is a shame. I mean, why not have a supply that has an MG on it? Why not? Anyway, forward deployed CVs. Your infantry tab is really nothing to write home about, especially after looking at the Polish one. There's lots of choices here. It takes a long time to get through it. This is probably your best unit, the Gurkha Rifles, 12 men with 3 MGs. They're really not as good as you might expect. You compare them to like Green Berets ODA or something. Yeah, and then you get... These guys are pretty funny. They're like Panzerjäger, but with Lore 80s, and they're Resolute, and the Gurkhas, right? And you do get forward deployed guys. You do get forward deployed guys, right? Paras for example. Well, too expensive. Yeah, I mean, this is a better RPG, right? Because of the extra pen, but and then I mean, it's just not that great. There's lots of choice, but there's no like standout kind of. Whoa, this is a good unit. You don't really get that feeling here. The Gurkhas are good LARP. They're 12 men, right? But if you compare them to some of the guys in like the Airborne Marine divs, like who were also forward deployed, these guys aren't even forward deployed. The Mariniers are decent because they've got like 3 MGs and they've got Resolute, so they're all right. But they've not got an not got an AT. But this is probably the most unique unit out of them all. I mean, Blinderside 18 pen, one shots a 4-armor vehicle can be useful. Can be useful, you know, with airborne forward deployment. These guys are obviously much worse, but 10 points cheaper. But the AT is just so much worse. This is an interesting unit, so that's something at least, because it's got a MBAD 1 on it, but it's 40 points. Why? With bad stealth. The arty tab, nothing really to write home about. This is a LARP thing. It's got cluster on it, and it's guided indirect cluster 81mm, but I tried using it, it doesn't kill anything because it's 81mm, so it still doesn't do anything. You get 105s, you don't even get 155s. Obviously the British one is better, so I'm not sure why this one's cheaper, or because it's para forward deployed. Okay. The tank tab, you just don't get many units. Like, basically, you don't get any fire support in this tab. I suppose you could bring the MGs, but you know what I mean. You don't get IFVs or 50 cal transports, really. I mean, I know there's 1 or 2 like this one, but... So, in the tank tab, you've got the Scimitars, but you only get 1 card, and the Scorpions, but you only get 1 card. You get, like, this thing, the Weasel 20 mil, but it's not got smoke. You only get 1 card. You get TOW2s and stuff, right? You know, you could get airborne forward deployed Milan 2s. Like, Europa is actually decently strong vehicle-wise, because obviously you've got the airborne forward deployment. And then you've got, like, you've also got AA. So this is airborne forward deployed Javelin LML. Barely fits on the screen, but basically it's got the airborne forward deployment, which is good. You get Paraminstrels, you know. You get the Darkfire from 4th. So, great, right? Helitab, you don't get a single anti-infantry helicopter in this whole division. Right? We missed out the Recon tab. The Recon tab gets Milan 2s with Special Forces. Recon deployed. So that's interesting because you can... I mean, I think this is overpriced for 45 points. You only get 4 of them. It's crazy. These guys, you know, airborne deployed, but the RPG's bad. These guys are a bit better. They've got 3 MGs. The special forces on this makes it go really fast. It goes faster than a regular one, so you will get to places before other people because you've got special force airborne deployed transports. Or at least airborne deployed, you know, vehicles. They're not actually the transports. It's just, there's just really nothing to write home about in this div. Like, there's lots of units on the page, but none of them are very good. None of them are bad. It's just none of them are that good. And, yeah, I mean, no rocket helos in the whole airborne division. So then you look at the planes, and you don't get long-range ASFs. At least you get this Darkfire thing, but even that only goes 3.8k. You compare it to an iHawk, which is like, what, 5? 4 or 5? I think it's 5. And so you just get shotgun planes again. And then, so you do get LGBT. This is the Buccaneer. The Buccaneer AT only has 45% accuracy. Yeah, I mean, it's 3 per card, and it's really quite cheap, but it's going to miss a lot. And then you get the LGBT. You get the Seed, but the Seed missile is terrible. And this is also the lowest ECM Seed aircraft in the game. And this only has 20% ECM as well. And, you know, your fighters aren't long range. Your bite isn't that good. And your hold isn't that good either. You don't get, like, I mean, sure, you can spam out toes till the cows come home. But they're not actually that cheap. They're really expensive. Not like Maryukas or something. Or, well, you know, like Rover Milans or something like that. So your bite isn't that good. Your hold isn't that good. And your air isn't that good. So it's a really bad div. It's actually, I would say it's the worst out of any of the NORTHAG divs. For 1v1, for team you can make anything work, but I don't really think it's that great. Final div. 9th US Motorised Infantry thing. So these guys, they've got a few similarities to MBAD, except they're just Americans. So the Logi tab, you know, nothing to really write home about. This has a very funny name, I guess. But you want this, but then you're sort of forced to bring these, which only have 300 supply. I mean, it's literally just a Chevron truck. Yeah. You don't get Airborne forward deployed anywhere in this division. Remember, this ain't a deck build. You don't get Airborne forward deployed anywhere in this division. Except this, which is actually a pretty funny unit. These guys have a Barrett 50 cal, and I'm pretty sure it can pen armored things, like one armor transports. I'm pretty sure if both of these hit while this is stood still with its 500% damage bonus, it one-shots a Milan 2 team, so this is a good unit. And you know, your infantry, you do get Dragon 2s. You do get Dragon 2s. And you can get grenade launcher Humvees, 50 cal Humvees. The 40mm grenade launcher is better than the Soviet one, which is like 35 or 30. You do get cheap ATGM spam. This is always 16 pen, like, but yeah, you get the TOW 2A, which has 25 pen and tandem, which means it really does a number on a lot of things. So, for example, when we were talking about the T64s before, and we said the ERA will save you. Actually, that's probably a bad example. If you had, yeah, whatever, it does one more damage against guys with ERA, which means that ERA is a detriment when you've got these. Yeah, what can I say? What can I say? I mean, there's infantry here. The light rifles are sort of semi-decent. They've got DMRs and MGs, and they're 10 strength. So they are semi-decent. You can get good momentum by just bringing the trucks. The RT tab, you get... This thing's really funny. So this is the American version of the coffin launcher. And it's got 12 armor, which means it survives a TOW 2 hit, and it's got smoke. So it's actually pretty decent. And you can bring 4 of them if you want. You don't really need 4. Then you've got this thing, which is copperhead rounds. So it's this, but basically costs more, less available. But if you've got recon near the enemy, you will have very, very precise shooting. The only issue is because the range is less, your regular rounds will actually be less effective. Right? This just ain't very good, right? But it's nothing new. Then you do get some M60s, M40s, sorry. No, sorry, M60s, I'm losing it. You do get a very funny Hellfire launching truck, which is actually hilarious. It's very expensive, though. You're paying 30 points for what exactly? Extra range, I guess. Can be worth it. Probably not. You know, the Recon tab... The AA tab, you get Avengers and Stingers. You do get decent helicopters. And you do get a decent air tab. So you do get Eagles. This thing's really funny. It's got the 30 pen. It's also got something called a Pave Claw. You do get Seed. You do get a fresh cluster plane with lots of bombs on it. You don't get an LGBT, but the F-16s are decent. And, you know, your Recon tab is pretty lit. Right, in terms of, like, you can bring even more TOW 2 things, but, like, yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you compare this to MBAD, You do get tanks, unlike MBAD, so it is a bit better than MBAD. You lose the forward deployment, but you know you still got. I don't know. I mean, you get a lot of ATGMs, like cheap ATGM spam, but you lose the forward deployment. But your air tab is, well, it's different. Yeah. I would put this. It's difficult. It's going to be one of these two. Between this and MBAD, the problem with MBAD is that their infantry tab is actually, you just don't get a lot of things, right? I think this is better than MBAD, right? So that's the completed tier list for 1v1. If you enjoyed this and you want to see games where I play all these divisions and how it goes, I would check the link in the description. That'll link you to all the deck builds. And the deck builds, the deck build video will have the links to all the games I played. In terms of like just pure 1v1, for team, all of these can work. None of them are terrible for team. But in terms of pure 1v1, Ninth is the outstanding winner of this patch. And you know, these guys are pretty decent. The Belgians aren't too bad. 25th slow opener, but it gets there. Same with the Polish one. The Dutch guys, they've got a pretty couple of fundamental weaknesses, like no long range AA, and then no cheap ATGM carriers, so you just get healer rushed and die, right? And yeah, so these divs at the bottom, they've got some pretty glaring weaknesses. Their stuff is just not there, it's just not worth it. So do let me know what you think. If you want to build your own tier list, the link will be in the description, it's just this. And I will see you around. GG.